To share with you a complex and mysterious thought, and I'm responding to one of our community members who made this statement. He said one of the harder things to understand is why God allowed her, his wife, to go down the road of the abuse movement stuff, why he allowed her to be so influenced by it and surrounded her with people that push it, why he won't tear down the web of enablers that are around her and pull her out of it, and so forth. And so here's the complex thought that I want you to give some time reflecting on. And I don't have a solid answer for this, or I have an answer, but let me say it this way: it's not going to be satisfying, probably to any of us. And so, why didn't God take this one individual and direct her out of the bad path that she's on? All right, so let's go back to Pharaoh and his army going across the Red Sea. Suppose that you were married to one of those soldiers, and the soldiers were wiped out by the Red Sea as it collapsed upon them. You could say the exact same thing that this person is saying here. Why didn't God save my husband? Why didn't God cause this man not to be part of this army that eventually led to his destruction? Well, when we microscopically look down on a singular individual that is part of a greater narrative, we're setting ourselves up for discouragement, despair, depression, cynicism, even ultimately walking away from the faith. Why didn't God keep my brother from being murdered? I mean, we can say this about any person that does bad, or bad things happen to them, when we zero in on that individual. And if we don't balance out that thinking with the grander narrative that God is writing, we can go to bad places in our thinking. And so, if you were married to one of Pharaoh's soldiers, and you just focus singularly on what happened to him perishing in the Red Sea, that is a narrow view of what is going on, and it's a setup uh, to again go to some bad places. And so, one of the problems is that the person that's thinking this way is thinking primarily all about themselves. They're thinking about their losses. They're thinking about their hurt. They're thinking about their pain. And I don't mean to be harsh or unkind about this at all, because I could make a similar statement to what this man is making here. Why didn't God keep my wife from committing adultery? Why didn't God keep my wife from doing, so many things? And what happens is that I will make myself the victim of what is happening in this greater narrative. Now, that's the irony of what this man is saying. This gentleman is communicating like a victim, just like the enablers that he's complaining about. These enablers are making his wife the victim, and now he is talking just like a victim because he is so focused on what is happening in the microscopic milieu of his wife's life. And that's exactly what would happen to the spouse of a soldier who perished in the sea. But when we look, take a greater view, a macro view of what is going on, and then that balances our thought processes. It doesn't change the pain. It doesn't change the grief. It just affirms that we live in a fallen world. People are free moral agents. People can get into the complexity of sin, and those microscopic decisions that people make that can end up in uh, such a condition to where they perish in the Red Sea. The apostles struggled similarly with Jesus dying on the cross. I mean, why does this person have to go down this path and be suspended on a tree and die. And again, when you look at it just in the micro, you can have ill-informed thoughts, and you could feel like the world is against you. And so we have to balance our thoughts. And so, on the ground level, where individuals are making terrible decisions, that's affecting many different lives. I mean, this man, this soldier who perished in the Red Sea, now he has a widow and children that will not have a father, and there will be economic problems and many other issues in this family's life. And so this wife could say, I mean, why did he get caught up in all that? Why, I mean, look what is happening to me. Well, again, she would take on the same victim mindset that this person is doing here in the forum, and we become like though, well, in his case, become like his wife and the enablers, and become part of that enabling network, because now we take on the victim mindset. And so we have to balance how we think about the trouble that comes into our life. We have to look at both the narratives, and if we don't, again, we're going to go down the drain. And so the thing that helped me to get out of this victim centered woe is me, complaining to God and complaining to others about what was going on in my life in the micro, I had to balance that with God is working a plan here that ultimately rests not just in his sovereignty, but it rests in his goodness, that God is doing a good work. And so if you look at the greater narrative, you see what Moses did. And of course, you see the result of that. And we are the fruit of that, by the way, as God was preserving his seed that ultimately died on the cross that led to our regeneration. And so, on the grander scale, it doesn't mean that we overlook what happens in individual lives, but we have to balance what happens in individual lives by having both views working simultaneously in our minds with this upper view, the controlling view, or we will become the victims and we will become harsh and cynical. And so, what I'm saying here will not remove the grief. It will not remove the disappointment. That comes in time. I mean, the widower is going to have to work through grief, the loss of her husband, and the repercussions of all that. She'll have to work through that. And so, having this understanding will not remove the pain and the sorrow and the grief that accompanies it, but without this understanding, then you could perpetually be in a place of grief, which will eventually lead to a bitter spirit and all kinds of harsh sins that can flow from that, like unforgiveness and anger and despair and depression. And so it's mysterious, it's complex, but it is the truth. And if something is happening in your microscopic life, either to you or to an individual, if you don't balance that with the grander narrative, then you're going to get lost in the weeds of what's going on in your world. And I would just appeal to you to repent, to change, to balance your thoughts. Don't become like the widower of the soldier who perished in the Red Sea.